The Wespener Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The First Level of Learning. Wespener.com. Genetic Manipulation, GM, Section. GM Paper Number 3, After the Deluge. By Wespener, Saturday, April 16, 2011. In the aftermath, building a new Earth. When the storms had subsided and the rains stopped, Ea and Namor saw Ziasudra's fire on top of Mount Ararat, and landed in helicopters, while Ninagal set sails towards the mountain. The Enlil was furious again. Was he ever in a good mood? When he saw that humans had survived. They were all supposed to have perished. He was so furious that he wanted to get into a fist fight with Ea, who calmed him down and said they were not human anymore, they were his own offspring. Ninma and Ninurta, also entering the scene, together with Ea, convinced Namor that these few survivals would be the genesis of a new race on Earth. Each of these human bodies who died and were killed due to intentional neglect at best and overt genocide at worst on the gods' part, was a soul carrier. Obviously, there were a whole lot of these ET individuals who had no respect whatsoever for intelligent life. EA and a few others seem to have been more compassionate, but perhaps that's just on paper? Not only had Earth been totally devastated after the deluge, so had Mars. The thin atmosphere that once had surrounded the planet was gone, its waters had evaporated, and now it was just a deserted planet of dust storms. Nanner reported that from now on, one could only visit the moon wearing eagle masks, helmets. So in a sense, Earth had been lucky. The atmosphere was still there, and the water would soon withdraw and give birth to new land and slightly different-looking continents. After had inspected what was left of the old Earth, the gods found that some important things they'd once brought down from Nibiru, like grapefruit trees, had survived, so they could still make wine. EA started experimenting with genetics and strengthened the grain that Ka-in once developed and made bread. From the seeds Ziasudra/Utnapishtim/Noah had saved on the Ark, the geneticists again began to seed Earth with different plants, animals and berries. Soon enough, from their long thoughts perspective, life started spreading around the planet again. Cows and sheep came to life, and Jumuzi, Ea's son, together with Ziasudra's middle son, became the first shepherds for the cattle and the sheep. Ea and Ninagal built dams to tame the Nile in Egypt and created a pastureland for Jumuzi's herds. 2. Gold, gold. We need more gold. Namor selected the Saudi Arabian peninsula for a new interplanetary rocket terminal to transport more gold to Nibiru. This was again a necessity, to the gods' dismay, because the latest passage of Nibiru had once again ripped off the gold shield of its atmosphere. All the hundreds of thousands of years of efforts from the gods and human slaves had been in vain, and the production had to start all over again, just when they thought they were at the end of the process. But the African mines were gone, the slave workers had drowned, the Anunnaki, most of them, had gone home to Nibiru, and the rocket terminal in Sippar, Mesopotamia, was destroyed as well. Ninurta finally came up with some good news. On one of his expeditions around the planet, he had found an abundance of gold in Peru, South America, high up in the Andes. From modern La Paz and east of Lake Pupo, in the sand from the running into to east coast of Lake Titicaca, he found lots of it. He also was able to combine copper and tin and create bronze. Remnants of these ancient mining activities can still be found, both by Lake Titicaca and La Paz. The bronze was very appreciated, especially when rebuilding Mesopotamia. After the deluge, all they had was brick, but the bronze could really stabilize the building blocks. It took 7,000 years to rebuild Mesopotamia after the flood with the limited equipment left for the gods to work with. 3. The Ninishzida, Ea's son, built 2 pyramids in Egypt. The first was a model pyramid, and the second was the Great Pyramid. He built the Great Pyramid at the south end of a straight line through the landing platform in Lebanon, Baalbek, to Mount Ararat, eastern Turkey, in the north. Then he installed the Nibiran master computer programs and astronavigation equipment in the Great Pyramid. Ninishzida had done an excellent job with the pyramids and to create the technological base, and Ea wanted to reward his son for work well done. So he decided that a monument should be built in his son's image. So he let build the Sphinx, which had the body of a lion, but with Ninishzida's head sculptured out. Let us beside the Twin Peaks a monument create, the age of the lion to announce. The image of Ninishzida, the peak's designer, let its face be. Let it precisely toward the place of celestial chariots Gezirat Pyramid of Egypt and the builders of the Sphinx. Namur ordered his son, Utu, Apollo in Rome, and Helios in Egypt, to be in charge of the Sinai spaceport on the 30th parallel, which now separated the Enlil's domains from that of the Enkis. The latter was in charge of the realms south of the 30th parallel. In the Great Pyramid, Ea's son, Jibal installed pulsating crystals and a capstone of electrum, to reflect a beam of incoming spacecraft. Mission control perched on Mount Moriah, future Jerusalem, out of reach for humans. 4. Marduk becomes Ra and Amen-Ra. Marduk, who inhibited a great ego and lust for power, was jealous of Ninishzida for having been rewarded with the building of the Sphinx in his image. He went to his father, Ea, and complained. He said that Ea once promised him power and glory, and look, he got none. Marduk's mind darkened from resentment. The tension between the Enlilites, called the Ram clan, and the Enkites, the Serpent clan, grew bigger and bigger, but Ninmah, the great peacemaker, decided they should divide the lands further into kingdoms, with local rulers. The suggestion had a positive response amongst the clans. All the royal clansmen on both sides were dedicated certain areas, and Marduk was by Ea appointed to be the ruler of Egypt. We are going to concentrate a little bit extra on Marduk, because he will be an important figure from Haran, all the way up to present time. Thus Marduk felt like his father had at least made an effort to satisfy his imperatives to become a ruler. So, about 9,800 years ago, Marduk was assigned Egypt and became Ra. He was now in charge of the workers there. Ninurta built a palace for Ninmah on Mount Moriah, and Namur and Ea awarded her the title Nineharsag, Mistress of the Mountainhead. According to Sitchin, she is also equivalent to Hathor in Egypt. Anki moved to Elephantine, Abu, island near Aswan, Syene. From there, he supervised workers building dams, dikes, and tunnels to prevent the Nile from flooding and control its pathway to the Mediterranean. Ea was known as Ptah in Egypt. 5. The murder of Osiris and the battle between Horus and Seth. To bring the story forward, let's contradict that by going back in time for a short moment, to that of the Deluge, 13,000 years ago. At that time, Marduk, together with his hybrid wife, Sarpanit, and their sons, Asar, Osiris, and Satu, Seth, Set, took shelter on Marspus with the Igigi commander, Shamgas. Asar and Satu, from Haran I will call them Osiris and Seth for simplicity, married Shamgas' daughters, Asta, Isis, and Nabat, Nephiz. Shamgas and Seth became pretty close. Osiris and Isis resided close to Marduk-Ra in the northern lowlands of the Lower Egypt. Seth and Nabat settled in the mountains of southern Upper Egypt, near the villa of Shamgas and the landing platform in Lebanon. Shamgas decided to set Osiris up, because he favored Seth and Nabat before Osiris and Isis. He told Seth that Osiris would always be Marduk's favorite, and even more so because he lived closer to his father. So, Shamgas, Seth and Nabat decided to assassinate Osiris. Hence, Shamgas and Seth invited Osiris to a banquet and poisoned his wine. Osiris fell unconscious, and they put him in a coffin and threw the coffin into the sea. Marduk-Ra, his wife Sarpanit, and Isis, got the news about Osiris' murder, and hurried to retrieve the coffin. They found it floating in the sea and brought it ashore. Legend says that Osiris' corpse was cut into pieces and spread out, and only parts of his body was floating in the coffin. The myth further tells us that Isis searched all over Egypt for the remains of her husband and found all the pieces, except for his penis, although, as we know, cutting off each other's genitals was nothing new amongst the gods. What is true or not in that story is hard to say, but Sitchin mentions nothing, to my knowledge, about the lost penis story. According to him, Osiris' body was intact, and Enki and Isis took semen from Osiris' corpse and impregnated Isis with it, unbeknownst to Seth and Shamgas. What is true, though, and a theme through Sitchin's books, especially in the Wars of Gods and Men, is that the gods, when they fought each other, rather than just killing their opponent, they castrated him and threw the penis away. This barbaric treatment of an enemy sounds pretty horrific, but it was implemented by the gods so that the defeated god could not reproduce and continue his bloodline. In other words, it was a reassurance of power and dominance. Seth, proud of his accomplishment of killing his brother, now declared himself, as the only remaining son of Marduk-Ra, to be the ruler of both Upper and Lower Egypt. Isis, however, declared she was pregnant by Osiris, went into hiding and gave birth to Horus. She trained him well to become a great warrior to be able to defeat Seth, who gathered an army of humans and advanced by force towards Lebanon, all to the border of Nineharsag's neutral Jerusalem region. When Horus grew up, he was trained and ready to meet Seth in battle. He gathered his own army and started marching. Seth noticed that Horus was pretty well prepared, and to stand any chance to win the conflict, he challenged Horus to a combat man-to-man. A far-ranging air battle took place. Horus hit Seth with a blinding weapon and then with some kind of harpoon. Blind, Seth crashed, and his testicles were squashed, or more likely, cut off by Horus. Horus bound Seth and dragged him before the council. The verdict was to let Seth live the rest of his life on Earth together with the Igigi astronaut corps, but without life-extending treatments. 6. Inanna's, Ishtar's, war against the Serpent Clan. Namur and his Ram clan were afraid that Ta and his Serpent clan would control Earth space facilities. The Serpents controlled everything regarding shipping of gold, and Marduk even was in charge of space travels between Earth and Nibiru. Hypothetically, the Serpents could stop the Rams from even leaving the Earth. In secret, Namur therefore sent Ninurta to set up the base in today's Peru, next to the Titicaca Lake, run by Enlil's son, Ninurta. She also built a spaceport on the plains next to the Andes. This area, being rich in gold, was now in the stronghold of the Ram clan, and in the middle of this rivalry, two Anunnaki from opposite clans fell in love. Inanna is known under many different names, such as Aphrodite, Venus, Ishtar, Athena, Kali, and Nini. She was also a son's daughter of Lord Namur, the Enlil. Her parents were Nannar and Ningal. Dumuzi, as we know, was Marduk's brother and Ea's son. Dumuzi was born on Earth, and so was Inanna. Therefore, they were short-lived in comparison to those who were born and stayed on Nibiru. Around 8670 BC, the two started laying eyes on each other and became lovers. Inanna revealed to Marduk's sister what her plans were. She wanted to build a great nation on Earth and be the ruling queen thereof, while her spouse would be given status in the empire. When Marduk's sister came back and told him about this, Marduk did not like what he heard. He wanted no competition from his brother. He and his sister, Jeshti-Nanna, therefore decided to set Dumuzi up. She seduced him and let Dumuzi have intercourse with her. After the fact, she scared him and told him that Marduk would accuse him of rape and he would be in deep trouble. Dumuzi was terrified and fled. However, he was in such a hurry that he accidentally slipped on a stone, fell into a waterfall and drowned. That was the end to peace between the two clans. Inanna was furious and wanted to take revenge for Dumuzi's death, so she went to war against Marduk. Ea and his clansmen supported Marduk in the feud, and Marduk's grandson, Horus joined him as well, together with the Igigi astronauts, and in one of the battles Inanna managed to blind Horus' right eye. Inanna showed to be a very skilled warrior and strategic, and she moved in closer and closer on Marduk, who fled and took shelter in the Great Pyramid of Giza. On foot, Inanna, Iskur, Adad, Namer's youngest son, and Ninurta cornered Marduk in the pyramid, in one of the airtight chambers. Instead of killing him in an instant, they decided to bury him alive, so they put stones before the entrance to the chamber and left Marduk to his destiny. The Serpent clan brought up the issue before the council and asked them to spare Marduk's life, but Inanna insisted that he deserved it after what he'd done to his own brother. Nine-Hersag brought the two feuding brothers, the Enlil and the Enki, before the council and suggested they exile Marduk and put Ninurta, Namer's son, in his place and thus create a clan shift. This became the final verdict. Ninishzida unsealed the chamber and found Marduk unconscious inside. Namer's eldest son managed to revive him and helped him out of the chamber. He was put before the council and got the verdict firsthand. So Marduk, his wife Sarpanit, and his son Nabu were exiled to a place where horned beasts were hunted, a land uninhabited by the descendants of Ziasudra, Noah. King Anu decides to give Earth to humankind. A new dispute took place when Namer appointed his son, Ninishzida, known as Tot in Egypt, as the lord of the Nile lands. Inanna, who'd fought the war against Marduk and won, demanded she'd get her own part of the kingdom. They could not come up with a working solution that all parties were satisfied with, so they called on King Anu of Nibiru to resolve the conflict. Anu hadn't visited Earth for 7,000 years, and he had great affection for Inanna, so he decided to heed the call for help. At this time, 7,200 years had passed since the Deluge. Humans had proliferated from the mountain lands to the lowlands. They originated from Ziasudra, but had Anunnaki genes. Offspring of the Igigi Mars astronauts were also around. In the distant lands Cain's people had survived. Anu and his wife, Antu, landed at Tilmun, land of the missiles, on the Sinai. Anu was shocked when he saw how much Namer and Ea had aged. They looked old and bearded, and Nine-Hersag, once a stunning beauty, was now old and bent. Anu, who was much older, looked younger than the children. Ea told his father about the message he got from Galzu about how they had to stay on Earth and couldn't go back to Nibiru, or they'll die. Anu said he never sent such a message at all and had no idea what they were talking about. He thought their staying on Earth was their own, determined decision. Apparently there was a great lack in communication here. Ea continued and said that because of Galzu's message, the seed of mankind was saved from the deluge, and would otherwise have been destroyed forever and humankind would have been extinct. Anu sat back in wonder. Then he said that it appeared that Galzu came as a messenger for the one God, in an effort to save mankind. Anu continued, saying that it seemed like they, the Nibiruans, were only emissaries for the human species, and humankind is destined to inherit the earth and make it their own. Anu now believed it was his and his people's job to educate them and give them knowledge so they can advance. Then, when they were educated enough, the Anunnaki should leave the planet. So King Anu dedicated 4 major regions to 3 different groups. Region 1, Enlil's lineage's domain. Enlil and his lineage, decreed the king, rule Mesopotamia through their designated kings, descendants of Ziasudra's sons, Shem and Japhet the Fair. Ziasudra's eldest son, Shem, Sem, and his descendants, rule the nations from the highlands running from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Around 3800 BC, Shem's descendants settle the ex-spaceport area of Iraq and the landing place at Lebanon. Shem's brother Japhet rules for the Enlilites from the highlands of Asia Minor, the Black and Caspian Seas, as well as the nearby coasts and islands, as they recover from the flood. Region 2, Enki's lineage's domain. King Anu orders Enki and his descendants to rule Egypt and Africa, though the descendants of Ziasudra's son Ham the Dark. Ham's line rules Canaan, Cush, Mizraim, Cush, Nubia, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Libya, beginning from the highlands and spreading to the reclaimed lowlands. Region 3, Inanna's domain. Inanna, said Anu, would rule the Indus Valley, to be settled around 2800 BC, as a grain source for the other regions. Region 4, Nineharsag's domain, the fourth region, Tilmun, Sinai, Anu declared, shall be ruled directly by Nineharsag and be reserved exclusively for Nibiruans and their immediate descendants. Then Anu and Antu flew with Ninurta and Iskar to the Taiwananku temple and overlooked the metallurgy, tin, works Ninurta built at Lake Titicaca. Then they were shown back to the spaceport by Ninurta, who proudly showed the king and queen how his men in the meantime had filled up the royal chariot with gold to the brim. They wanted to impress and show that the South American gold mining project was a success. Anu was impressed, and he summoned his grandson, Marduk, to the Andes to have a word with him. The king had a bad conscience for having treated Marduk unfairly and favored his brother before himself. Marduk and his son, Nabu, arrived at the spaceport and stood themselves before King Anu. Marduk, in sadness, told him that Sarpanit, the hybrid, had died from age. Anu then pardoned Marduk and commuted his exile. Then Anu said, so everybody could hear, if destiny is that mankind is going to take over and rule the world, let it so be. Give them knowledge up to a measure, secrets of heaven and earth them teach, let them learn about laws and righteousness, then depart and leave. 7. It is noteworthy that King Anu is talking about law and righteousness, when the Anunnaki themselves had been constantly broken all such rules in what seems like almost a childish, but murderous, behavior, which we, as humans, definitely have inherited, unfortunately. We are talking about another, alien species of course, with other laws, rules and regulations than that of us humans, but for now, just keep in mind what their laws and rules seem to be and if those are the ones we want to obey to in the near future. It's bad enough as it is here on Earth. Point in case as we go on. Wes. As soon as King Anu and Queen Antu left Earth with their rocket filled with gold, Marduk started his intrigues again. He was furious over the South American spaceport and blamed Inanna for the death of his brother, Jumuzi. Anu had found liking in Inanna and even chosen her as his consort, in addition to Antu. As a present he had given her her own region in India, as well as Ruk. In simple words, Marduk was jealous over the power the king had given her. Namur, the Enlil, named the present era the Age of the Bull, Taurus, and started teaching the humans to use bricks to build cities of mud, and temples for the royal Nibiruans and the angels, Igigi. These royals were given numerical ranks from which they were worshipped by the humans. The higher the number, the higher up in the hierarchy, and the more power they had. So, Namur made sure humankind learned about hierarchy as well, something that has halted our evolvement quite substantially over time. This is how the hierarchy was numbered. Anu. 60. Namur, the Enlil. 50. Ninurta, Namur's son and successor. 50. Ea, the Enki. 40. Nannar, son of Enlil. 30. Utu, Shamash, son of Nannar. 20. Inanna, sister of Utu. 15. How they came up with this hierarchy and why it was accepted by lower-rank gods, goddesses like Inanna and Marduk, is unclear, but I haven't seen any indications of that this rank was protested across the lines. 8. Educating mankind. The gods then built the cities of Eden, Mesopotamia, and in each city they built a temple where humans could worship their gods. Ninurta got Lagash, where he got hangars for his aircraft, and armory for his missiles. He may as well have been one of the gods who taught humankind about warfare, being the Enlil's warrior son. Utu, who rebuilt the city of Sippar, taught law to the humans, and Nannar was given the city of Rim. Iskar returned from the Andes to reside in a temple in the mountains north of Mesopotamia, Sumer. Marduk and Nabu, his son, came over to stay with Ea in Eridu. As we can see, The Enlil's Ram clan was in charge of most of Mesopotamia. Inanna chose the first king to be the Lugil. The Lugil represented the lords of the Adipites there, human descendants of Ziusudra. Ram clan appointed Lugils then ruled the land between the rivers for 24,510 years. They shifted their admin center from Kush to Ruk, then to Akkad, all areas ruled by the Anunnaki Council. 9. The Tower of Babel. The Igigi had great estates in Lebanon and Sumer, where they ruled in abundance. The estates grew as they continued mating with humans, and the number of offspring increased. Marduk taught these hybrids to make brick for Babylon, which was going to be his own spaceport. By having one of his own, he could challenge Judah with his Ram clan spaceport in the Sinai. Namur saw what was happening and asked Marduk to drop the project peacefully, but Marduk didn't listen and continued building the launch tower of Babylon. By 3450 BC, Namur told his lieutenants that Marduk was building a tower, a non-permitted gateway to heaven, entrusting the earthlings. Ninurta emphasized that this had to be stopped, so at night, they raided the area and destroyed the tower. Marduk had to flee again, and ended up in his father's, Ptah, region, the Nile. The Ram clan scattered Marduk's servants and programmed them with different languages and scripts. Marduk, now in Egypt and calling himself Ra, didn't like that his brother, Ninishzida, Tot, resided in the area, and for the next 350 years, the tension between the two increased and their armies clashed over Egypt. Eventually, their father, Ptah, ordered Tot to leave Egypt to Ra. Marduk Ra triumphed and reunited Egypt under his command. In reality, Ea had a bad conscience that didn't go away, for not being able to give his son the kingdom of Nibiru to rule, but at least he could now give him Egypt. Ea/Ptah also gave Marduk Ra-thems, the supercomputer programs. In an effort to make Egypt prosper, he gave Marduk Ra all his knowledge, except how to revive the dead. 10. Marduk Ra is rewriting history. One of the first things Marduk did was to rewrite history in his favor. He immediately removed the head of the Sphinx, which previously was sculptured in the image of Ninishzida, and replaced it with Asar, Marduk's son. This is the head we see on today's Sphinx. Marduk Ra wanted to place himself in the position as the one and only god, and therefore, he wanted to erase all the history of all the gods previous to him. I have reasons to believe that not only did Marduk rewrite history, but he also used BST, blank slate technology, or something similar, to erase the memory of humankind. Another technique, which is more drastic, but quite effective, is to disconnect our minds from the Akashic records. This is not that hard to do if you are aware of that the Akashic records for the Earth mass consciousness, from which we pull our collective memories of our past, are located in the astral around our planet. One way to erase our memories is to distort the connection between the human mind and the Akashic records. A pole shift would most probably do it, if done artificially and scientifically, with this goal in mind. This would not erase the Akashic records, only our connection with them, and thus our memories of our collective past. If this connection is tampered with and we lose our collective memories, it's like we wake up and have no memories of our past. We're starting all over from day one. Body/mind/spirit work as usual and can think and act as it always has, only without its memories. If this was what Marduk did, he succeeded in erasing memories of previous deities. Tot, Ninishzida, now exiled, moved all the way to Mesoamerica with his loyal officers, and there became known as Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent. 11. Inanna rules the Indus region and Ruk in Sumer. Namur, who was afraid that humans would be as powerful as the gods and learn about immortality, triggered by the Tower of Babel, continued the ordering of writing new languages into the codes of humans, different codes in different areas of the world to create separation rather than unity. So he ordered Ea to create a new language for Aratta, Inanna's Indus Valley civilization. However, Ea refused to give her thems, then in Marduk's possession, to make Aratta the world power. He said Inanna could share with Arata what she'd already seduced out of him earlier. In Merkur, the second ruler in Ruk, a Directed-Apan hybrid descendant of Inanna's twin brother, Utu, sent his son, Banda, to deliver a message saying that the Aran king had to swear submission to Ruk. The Aran king preferred a trade. He wanted them in exchange of Arata's precious stones. If Merkur still insisted on war, he suggested they choose one champion from each camp to do the combat. Banda returned to deliver to his father the reply from the Aran king, but he got sick on his way back and suddenly died, so the peace message never reached Merkur. Inanna, who now ruled two kingdoms, Arata and Ruk, had still not let her mind go off Jumuzi, and she missed him. It was so bad that Inanna started hallucinating about him and had a harder and harder time differentiating between the real world and her inner uncontrolled emotions. This made her pretty dangerous, due to the position she had as queen. In Ruk, she set up a house of pleasures, equivalent to a whorehouse in today's terms. Inanna herself took lovers from there and elsewhere, pretending they were Jumuzi, promising them long lives and other desirable things. Then she went to bed with them in the evening, and when the morning broke, they were found dead in her bed, the origins of the tale about the Black Widow. Utu, Inanna's twin brother, who knew the secret how to revive the dead, managed to bring Banda back to life and brought him back to Inanna in Ruk. Inanna, now in a bad mental state, thought Banda was Jumuzi, and cried out, "This is a miracle! My beloved Jumuzi has come back to life." 12. Gilgamesh and the Elixir of Immortality. Banda then succeeded his father, in Merkur, as the king of Ruk. Banda married Ninurta's daughter, Ninsun, who gave birth to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was obsessed with immortality and would do anything to be like the gods and live for millions of years. So he went to Baalbek in Lebanon to plead with the astronauts for immortality. He and his android guard, Enkidu, sought the launch pad in Lebanon, hoping the gods would give him the same immortality they enjoyed. From a distance, Inanna saw Gilgamesh take off his clothes to take a bath, and she desired him. She approached him and tried to seduce him. When Gilgamesh refused, Inanna got furious and let loose the gourd bull on him out on the launch pad. However, while Enkidu held the bull, Gilgamesh was able to stab it to death. Still determined to find longevity, Gilgamesh continued his journey, and in a tunnel in Sinai he found Ziasudra, still alive after all these centuries after the deluge. Ziasudra then decided to give Gilgamesh monatomic gold, something he himself had used to stay alive for so long. He said that Namur now granted Gilgamesh this special treatment as well. Happy, Gilgamesh left, but later, someone stole his stash, and Gilgamesh ended up dying like any other human hybrid. 13. Marduk offering Pharaoh's immortality. Marduk, after have heard about Gilgamesh's obsessive search for immortality, started pondering this whole issue to see if he could use it to his own benefit. He decided he could use it to establish loyalty amongst his rulers and high priests. Hence, he told his Egyptian kings that they would journey in their afterlife to Nibiru and enjoy immortality together with the gods. This immortality cult could unite the kings around the Nile and strengthen Marduk's position against Inanna. Inanna, who had great weapons at hand, armies, and was in possession of gold powder for her own immortality, held her position and stronghold on Sumer for 1,000 years. During this time, Homo sapiens were encouraged to worship the Enlilites, the Ram clan. In Egypt, on the other hand, Marduk introduced a totally different religion. He taught his human servants to worship only one god, and that god was no one less than Marduk Ra himself. He told them there were no other gods than he, himself. When his father, Ea, heard of this, he was baffled, because this was totally unheard of before. Marduk, however, was remobilizing his armies to once again challenge Inanna and the Enlil clan. In both Marduk's and Inanna's minds, there was only room for one world ruler, not two. 14. Sargon, the Akkadian warrior king. Inanna, in an effort to defeat Marduk once and for all, decided she wanted a strong warrior king. In 2400 BC, she chose her gardener, Sargon, to lead her human armies and rule Sumer for her. Why Sargon? Because he had the stomach to rape Inanna, his own queen, and Inanna enjoyed it. She was fascinated by his courage to do so, and his physical strength. She even managed to convince Namur about her choice of warrior king. Inanna and Sargon thus ruled from Akkad, Agada, which they built close to Babylon. In 2316 BC, Marduk and his son Nabu were in Egypt, and Sargon saw the opportunity. With his great army, he invaded Marduk's Babylon, and then withdrew. When Marduk and his son returned from Egypt, they fortified the city to keep his enemies out. In addition, Marduk decided to build his spaceport in Babylon, the heart of Eden. Inanna got furious and she and Sargon started a gigantic war against Marduk. What followed was the bloodiest war in Earth's history, and both sides used laser weapons on each other's human soldiers. Eventually, Sargon died in battle. 15. Inanna's armies move forward. After the intense war had subsided, Nergal, Marduk's brother, visited Inanna in Uruk and allied with her, although he was an Inkite. Thus, Nergal became Inanna's lover, and together they planned how to rule the world. As part of the plan, Nergal left Uruk and he and his men rode to Babylon, where Marduk greeted his brother. Nergal said that if Marduk would leave Babylon immediately, and go to South Africa, he could secure weapons and computer systems that had been hidden there since the Deluge. Marduk, who had no reason to mistrust his brother, acted on it and left. While Marduk was in South Africa, Nergal broke into Marduk's control room and stole his brilliance, energy radiation source, controlling the irrigation system for all Mesopotamia. Ea did not approve of this and banished Nergal back to Africa, but Nergal still left a garrison of men near Babylon, where they could aid Inanna. In 2291 BC, Inanna, Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, and the Akkadian armies captured the spaceport in Lebanon. From there, they conquered Jericho, which up until then had been under Nanar's, Inanna's father, control. Encouraged by previous successes, Inanna moved on, joined armies with Nergal, and conquered Egypt. In her efforts to become the Queen of Earth, Inanna, in 2255 BC, destroyed Anu's temple and sent Naram-Sin to Nippur to attack Namur's minions there. Namur did not let this go unhandled for long. Enraged, he sent his son Ninurta and his army to stop Inanna. He massacred all humans he could find in Akkad and to reconquer Mesopotamia. He ordered Naram-Sin to be killed and Inanna arrested and brought before him. Inanna, however, got away and fled to Nergal in South Africa, and for 7 years they plotted how to overthrow the Anunnaki Council. 16. The Enlil visited by Galzu in dream state ruled by first defeating Marduk. Galzu, the mysterious person, whom had managed to get the great king Anu to realize that he should leave humankind to rule the earth, once again showed his non-physical presence, this time to the Enlil, in dream state. By now, the Anunnaki considered him a representative of the Creator, or all that is, and had deep respect for him. Galzu warned him that when Earth moved zodiacally from the age of the bull, Taurus, to the age of the ram, Aries, Marduk would rule the earth. He further told the Enlil, a righteous and worthy man must be chosen, by him and his seed will civilized man be preserved. Namur thought a lot about this vision, which he kept to himself. He decided to send Abraham, son of Nanar's high priest king, Terhu, a hybrid with a lot of Anunnaki genes in him, on missions to thwart Marduk's moves to position his forces to capture the spaceport on the Sinai. As soon as Abraham left Haran, Marduk moved in and the next 24 years he spent planning on how to take over Earth. 17. The Anunnaki dropped nuclear bombs over Sinai spaceport before leaving Earth to Marduk. The Anunnaki and the Nibiru-A.M.I knew that they soon would have enough gold to shield Nibiru's atmosphere, And they could all go back to their home planet. Then they could leave Homo sapiens sapiens to manage on their own. By the end of their stay on Earth, the Anunnaki tried to end all their old feuds with each other, perhaps to not bring these conflicts back to Nibiru. The humans were used as slave labor to dig up the last gold resources and precious metals and stones needed, and had them help out with other things, too. Not the least, they had human armies fight wars and battles between the gods to settle things between rival parties. And rival parties help out with other things, too. Not the least, they had human armies fight wars and battles between the gods to settle things between rival parties. And rival parties there were. On the one hand, there was Namur and Ninurta, who used hybrid armies, humans, and Nibiruan weapons in Sumer to fight against Inanna when she invaded the Anunnaki reserve in the spaceport area. On the other hand, there was Marduk Ra, who proclaimed his divine right to rule on Earth. The Nibiran Council still refused to let Marduk come back to Nibiru, because they were afraid he was going to plot a coup to take over the kingdom. And on Earth, they did not know what to do with him either. So they gathered the Anunnaki Council to discuss the matter. All council members were against Marduk and Nabu, and saw them as a major problem in all camps. Most of the Anunnaki on Earth were eager to leave and go home, but before they did, they decided that if Marduk would be the ruler of Earth, at least they should deny him the spaceport in the Sinai. All senior Anunnaki, except TA, agreed to use nuclear weapons to stop Nabu's advance through Canaan towards the Sinai spaceport. Before the Anunnaki Council executed their orders, they radioed King Anu on Nibiru and asked him of permission to nuke the spaceport and Nabu's human armies. Stunningly, Anu gave his permission. This speaks a lot about the C.A.M.I. on the home planet, and not only of the Anunnaki down here on Earth. A lack of compassion seems to run in the blood of these beings, at least on royal levels, which is that counts for us humans, because they are the ones who make the decisions, the C.A.M.I. people. Airships were sent down to bring the Igigi home. In 2064 BC, Ninurta attacked the Sinai. The first missile hit Mount Mashu, where the controlling equipment was housed. Then, a nuclear bomb was dropped above the place of the celestial rocket ships, with a brilliance of 7 suns. The earth shook and crumbled, the heavens were darkened after the attack, and of all the beautiful forests were destroyed, leaving only burnt stems left. Nergal, Ea's son, bombed Marduk's forces in Canaan. He nuked Sodom and Gomorrah, and 3 other cities allied with Marduk. These nukes were what made the Dead Sea dead, and it still hasn't recovered in today's 21st century. There is still radioactivity in the area today, enough to induce sterility in animals and people who absorb the water there. Archaeologists confirm the flooding, abandonment of the area and sudden deadening of life in 2024 BC. The destruction was tremendous. And with that, most of the Anunnaki left the planet, just as destructively as the once arrived.